Okay, so I know this is a funny hour. I know not a lot of our American officials are joining us today, but they've all asked if they can get the replay, which I will be sending out shortly after this webinar commences. But I'm really excited to do this. So first, let me ask, who in here is an official? Who in here is new to the officials, or in what capacity are you aware of the officials? Are you an official? Have you joined maybe one of the tech hacks at Miss Jones PA? Did you just see this come up? Did you see Ursula's post? So let us know so I can figure out how detailed I should get into introducing myself when it's my turn. Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Oh, look at all the officials and new people. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so today we are going to be joined by Ursula, and I'll get to that in just a minute, but we're going to be talking about your relationship with your executive. And in this context, we're going to probably use the word principal a lot because it depends on whatever role you're in. You might call them executive, you might call them a principal. It might just be you have a manager that you report to, but executive doesn't always work. So we've decided to go with principal at the moment. But how do you achieve that true collaboration and build that mutual respect and vision? So we're going to talk about this connection you have with your executive, and I'd really love to get to know more about the people that are joining, what your relationships have been in the past in your executives. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that in a moment, but let me get into who you're talking to. So let me just move myself out of the way. Isn't this the coolest? I love this app. And so my name is Lauren Bradley. I'm the founder of The Officials, for those that are here that are new. We are an online training platform for administrative professionals, and we are for admins, by admins. All of our programs are created by admins or admin industry experts. And I myself have been every title under the sun: private PA, EA to the CEO, VA, office manager, temp. I mean, I've done everything. And one of the things that I always was missing was affordable training. And so that's what I bring to the table. And I really love partnering with people that really care about our industry. And if that's how I found Ursula, she's amazing. I absolutely adore her. From the moment we talked, in fact, I didn't find her. I think you reached out to me actually when I did find you. We were following each other, but I think you guys reached out to me first to start that conversation. And it was, we could have talked for hours and hours. Whenever we get on the phone together, we talk for hours. So Ursula is just one of those, she's a trusted friend, learned expert. She's someone that you can go to, and she has just this calm demeanor, and you can just see how she really cares about people but is mission driven in a way that just works so symbiotically. So I'm going to introduce you to Ursula. Thank you so much for coming here today and for helping us. Can you introduce yourself a little bit to the crowd?
Yes, well, thank you so much, Lauren. It is such a wonderful thing to be here with you and your wonderful official community. And thank you for the Australian attendees. I can see you all there, so thank you for the support. It is such an honour to be presenting this webinar, because not only does this opportunity give you some time to reflect and think about why this topic is so important, but it also allowed me to resolve some things in my mind while I was working through the program. So there's a lot of amazing gold nuggets in this program. And so I encourage you all to watch this, learn from the webinar. It is just something that I think everyone will relate to. A little intro about me. So I have been an EA for nearly 30 years, which is crazy. I just turned 46 in December last year. I've got a 22-year-old daughter. And I started from the ground up as a medical receptionist to start with, and then worked my way through to various admin roles. I've always been an admin professional, and eventually ended up as an executive officer before moving on to my own business. And that came about through people that I'd left, so principals and executives that I'd been working with that I had left. continually ringing me saying that they haven't yet got an EA and that they need someone to help organise their luncheon or their evening event. And I continue to say yes, because we all know that it's very hard to say no to our former bosses. But one of them suggested, why don't you open a business? You could just about start something like this. So Capital EA was born from several SOS requests, we say. And the rest has, well, that was in 2014. I moved over from my full-time job in 2016, and I've been officially running the show since then. I do have grey hair since then. I keep them blonde for that reason. But that's a little bit about me, and it's just such an honour to be here, and I'm really keen to hear lots of questions. So I hope that you participate in any way, and any way that I can help you. As Lauren says, I'm really passionate about this, and I still look after many people in the EA capacity in my role as managing director in my own business, and wouldn't have it any other way. So I love and am very passionate about the EA role.
That's brilliant. And that was really succinct. And do you feel like it's really been 4 years since you went full time, or is it flown by? Does it feel like it's been a
Yeah,
million years and it's flown by at the same time?
it's yeah, exactly. It's been yes and no. And but I tell you, there's so much I've learned about being comfortable with myself, even in business,
Mhm.
which people would that have known me since I started would actually see that as well. I wasn't always comfortable with it, and even speaking as someone in the official space of being someone that could speak about the EA role, that came through lots and lots of pushing myself out of my comfort zone. So some
Well,
of the
we're glad
stretch.
that you're doing it, because people can learn a lot from your experience and how you care about this industry. So, okay. So let's talk a little bit about you guys for a second. So tell me what your situation is now, or kind of answer some of these questions. Have you ever had an executive or a principal that it didn't start off on the right foot? What is your relationship like now with your principal? Have you ever had an excellent relationship with a principal? We kind of want to hear what you guys are thinking about. We're gonna talk a little bit today about one, what it's like to work with someone and it just clicks. All cylinders are firing, right? Then we're going to talk about what it's like when that doesn't happen. And it's really bad when you've gone from one that was really good and then you go to one that was bad, and you feel like you come out of that job where everything was working, everything was great, and you feel like, you're hot potatoes. And then you go into this new role, and do you question yourself? Well, how do you turn it around? Can it be turned around? All of that. But I'd love to hear more about, kind of where you are in your journey, and if this is something you need help with right now, or you just know this is going to come up at some point, or it has come up and maybe it wasn't handled the way you wanted, and you want to know more about how to fix these sort of turbulent relationships sometimes. Okay. So we're going to start with story time. So as many of you know, that my word of the year is stories this year. And I wanted to, and I've told this to Ursula, you and I have been on the phone before, and I go, if someone was just listening to us, if the EA community just heard us talking, they would learn so much. They would be able to say, oh my God, that happened to me. This is amazing to see someone who's gone through it, who's come out the other side, what hindsight looks like, how we dealt with these things. And we always have these really great conversations. And so I'm hoping that's what this is like. So I want to call it story time at the moment. So Ursula, I have a question for you. Okay, so can you tell me about a time where you had a role where everything was working, that you had a really good relationship with your executive and your principal, and sort of what contributed to that? What did it feel like? And just tell me a little bit about a time where you worked with someone that everything worked well.
Yeah, so I can recall this time very easily because it was probably the best time I had in my career. I did get on very well with this principal, and when I reflected back, thinking about what made it click, we had similar sense of humours, and he didn't take life seriously. He enjoyed to have a laugh at the end of the day, and he didn't think that I needed to be as, I suppose, as put in the box as EAs and principals are. So, for instance, we sat side by side on his desk, and it was a large kind of like meeting desk. And I found that strange at first. So I said, "Oh, my desk, my area is out here," and he said, "Oh, no, no, no. I thought someone would have told you. You sit here next to me." And I thought, "Oh my God, this is going to be a bit weird." Anyway, but once we got started and underway, we just literally, it was like yin and yang. We absolutely worked so well together. We always started with a coffee catch up in the morning, and it was always him asking me about, what did I do the night before. He had a genuine interest in me, my family. What time did I finish work? It was just a lovely, lovely, respectful relationship. And it got me thinking about why, I guess that why I enjoyed that time. And there was a part of that relationship that I thought, wow, you've actually got to be a little careful, because in this instance, he was basically fired by one of our federal government ministers, and I was left without a job. And he actually resided in Melbourne, so he went back to Melbourne, and we got the call at 7 o'clock at night. I did a lot of hours working in that role and travelled extensively with him. And when we got the call, I burst into tears, and so did he. And I remember thinking, gosh, this is actually, how far have I delved into this where I'm actually really hurting now? I'm hurting, and I knew like this is something, nothing lasts forever. And that made me reflect and think, whilst you do have a very close relationship, or can have a very close relationship with your principal, it's still so important to keep those boundaries, where they're there for you not to fall deeply into this doubt, and you're thinking, oh God, I'm never going to find someone again. It was really, really an upsetting time. I remember meeting with friends and people that I knew I could confide in, and they were like, oh, what are you going to do? And I was even tempted to move to Melbourne. He continued to roll down there, and I thought, that's just crazy. But it
Because
was
you get
just,
this emotional connection that the success and your worth and the
yeah.
relationship that you have
He
is
honestly,
contributes to
literally,
your value and your happiness and in your
yes,
job.
yeah, yeah. I thought, wow. So you still have to be careful, with how much you delve into a role, where I can honestly say I was putting 150% in, and at the end of the day, things do come to an end. And while it was a fantastic role, and if I would go back and change anything, I'd probably put a few more boundaries up where I still considered it a job, and it wasn't someone that I needed to work with, in his back pocket for the rest of his life until he died, that sort of thing. So yeah, it was a really lovely time. And I had a total of 4.5 years working with him. He was a chairman of an organization, and he didn't trust very many people. So I was his right hand woman, and whatever I said goes. And he made that very clear to all his principal leadership team as well. While he wasn't, because he was living in Melbourne, he said, well, I'm not here. She's the boss. So talk to her about anything, and she'll relate to me if I need to know it. So there was instant respect, which made my job just so much easier.
That is, I mean, that is one of the things that if we could have executives listening to this, if we could have
Yeah.
principals listening to this, of how do you build that relationship? How do you trust an assistant? Um, how do you hand off all this work? And it all starts with this base level of just respect and I mean, you were sitting next to him, you were being treated as an equal, you were being treated in the exact same way, which is, I mean, when we talk in the influential assistant course, or one of the biggest things I find I'm drilling home, especially this year, is that we are all human, and therefore we are all equal. We are all peers. Just because someone has a different job title than you or more money than you does not mean that they have any more value than you. And especially with assistants, we're always trying to prove our worth. And
Mm,
culturally, a lot of us are women, and culturally we've been taught that we have to prove our worth instead of saying we have value and then going in and giving the value. And We kind of do it the other way around. We don't ask for the raise until we've done the job and then we get mad because we're like, why didn't you give me the money when I've been doing this job? It's like, well, you gave it to us for free. The narrative that you're saying is I give it to you for free. And so when we're already fighting against that and we're learning better and we're doing better and the world is doing better, trying to do better. And it's still an uphill battle. But when your executive, when your principal already comes in, being respectful and treating you in that way, it it's like this, there's like this sigh of relief. It's just, you don't realize the weight of that battle as an assistant, because we're service led. We want to help others, so we don't want to be the person that they have to help. And so we don't realize the weight that we carry there. So I think the very basic of what you're saying, what I'm hearing here is that relationship really involved you having confidence in your abilities, and him having confidence in your abilities, and the mutual respect.
That's it. That's exactly it. And I didn't need to prove it in any way. He met me and it was instant. And I think that made such, there's a comment here that says, instant respect is exactly that. I didn't need to prove anything. They handed me over to him and said, this is your executive assistant. And he was like, great, let's get going. And he knew how to work with EAs. He knew what he wanted out of an EA. He wanted
Doesn't that
to,
help? That helps so much.
yeah. And I guess the other thing that he learned straight away is that, I was invested as well. Instantly I wanted to know about some of the things I actually teach in the webinar about what makes him tick, where are his boundaries, how long is he committed into this role, who are his people that he considers to be trustworthy and that I could trust instantly as well. Who are people I need to be wary of, and to be careful with my P's and Q's in case I share something that I shouldn't be sharing. So I, part of that conversation that I had up front, because I could sense he was ready for me to do that, made it 100 times better.
Yeah. And it does help because we are often empaths, and when is the right time, when you feel you've built up that trust, when you've done enough to, because that's just relationship building in general. It's not that part's not earning, that's just feeling someone out, knowing when the time is ready, of those behavioral cues, and knowing when they're giving you a little bit more, and being able to give that challenge, give that feedback. And so what did that do for your personal life? What if you were sick and you needed time off? What if when you went home, what was your stress levels like? Like, what was it like working for someone like this? How did that impact your other half of your life?
Yeah. Look, I'd have to say that in this role, when I say 150%, I did put my career first. And that was in 2007 to 2011. So I'm just thinking of how old my daughter was at the time. And, I remember thinking, I've got to still connect with her. There was days I'd bring her into the office when he was in Melbourne, but equally he actually knows her today as a 22-year-old because he pops into my office here in Canberra whenever he's here, and I have a little espresso coffee cup ready for him because that's all he ever drinks. So anyway, he's continued to be a big part of my life even today. And I remember coming home thinking, right, weekends and, being home on time to put Kiana to bed and doing various things like that. And he was always very respectful of that. And if I didn't get home in the evening, I would always ring her and talk to her about, what storytelling I was going to give that night. And it definitely made a big impact on my home life. I won't say it didn't. I put in a big effort into this. And when I
That
mentioned
sounds
I
like
was
it was part of the role. Like that was the
it
role
was
that you
part of the
had,
role.
right?
Yeah, it was part of the role. And also I was traveling a lot. This was involving me going around Australia and to regional areas and meeting with regional country parts of Australia to help with it was water supply. And, sometimes we were greeted with very negative, country folk that didn't want us there because we were essentially in government pulling back their water supply. So that was another contentious issue, and that's what made it probably interesting as well. But yes, home life, I couldn't have done anything without my husband. you know, he constantly cooks dinners. He still does today. He's used to it. We get the HelloFresh package every Monday, and he's got that down pat. He can follow a recipe like no one else. And there's no way I
That's
could do the
amazing.
role I did without that support, particularly
Without
having
that
a
support,
child.
right? That
Yeah.
sounds like it was a very, but it sounds like it was a very interesting and fulfilling role. Of course, there's the balance. Like this, this time in my life, I'm going to focus on this particular role. But when you needed that time, when you absolutely needed that time,
Oh,
I'm assuming there was no question. There was
oh,
that you had built up that respect.
yes, 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 yeah. No, that was my choice entirely.
Yeah,
No, if I needed
we've
time
all
off,
done that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, it was, I didn't even have to say anything, you know, like I could just send an email in to say, look, this is where I'm at. You can contact me on my mobile if you need me, you know, and it was just
See,
instantly.
that's the kind of relationship that really works when you're able to say, listen, I'm not coming in because I have to
Yeah,
do this thing. There's been an emergency, or my daughter has a thing this morning, and you know what the schedule is, you know his schedule, you know it works, and you just say the thing. You don't need to
yeah,
ask permission. You don't need to fret and worry that you have to call
yeah.
in. I was just watching a TikTok the other day, and they're asking this one, like, how has America messed you up to expats? There was someone saying that he was living in Switzerland or the Netherlands, and he had a heart attack. And the first person he called was his work instead of his mother to say he'd had a heart attack because he was so worried about not going, because we work in America, right? And
Yeah.
so it's because of but if you have a relationship with someone like that, you don't have to think, oh my God, you want to, if you can get a chance to text, but you can call your mother first if you need to. You can call a parent first if you need to, or a spouse or whatever. Okay.
Exactly. And
Okay.
saying that, Lauren, you know,
No, go
it's
ahead.
funny because I've had the opposite where I've had bosses say, you know, if I've called in sick, the response has been, what hospital are you in? I'm like,
Yeah, exactly.
I've just got a cold, like I can't come in. No, well, you didn't tell me what hospital you're
Where
in.
do we
I'm like,
send
oh my
flowers?
God.
Oh, I
Yeah.
know. I imagine that the dedication you put into everything you do, I can only imagine that. Okay. So let's talk about the other side of that coin and what happens when, and it happens more often than you think, because it's like a magic relationship. It doesn't, we're talking about a platonic relationship, we're talking about a professional relationship, but it is much like a job and finding the right job that you work at, just in general, the right company. It's all finding the right match like you would in a regular, long-term
Mhm.
relationship. Is that you got to kiss a lot of frogs. Is this the right company for you? And it's always the wrong one until it's the right one. There's a lot more, it's the wrongs to get you to the right. So I know a lot of people right now that are just taking jobs to get money, and it's not quite working out, or it's not the job they really want because the economy has been infested by the pandemic, right? The economy as well as being is sickened at the moment. And so it's just part of that climb, and you learn something from every one of these relationships. So my question is, have you ever had, I assume so, have you ever had a time where it didn't start off well, or it didn't go well, and you did not
Yeah.
mesh in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And that has varied both with male and female bosses. And I'll say up front, I know I work better with male bosses, and I'm trying to still work a little bit out why that is so different gender wise. And I have hit the nail on the head on a few of them, and it's not always been our issue as EAs integrating with them. It's been more on their end and the type of power play they've had to play to get where they are. But certainly, yes, I've had some very difficult starts to roles where, I like to say that in some ways I've jeopardized it myself, because it's been like one of those unraveling balls where you make one error and then you watch it unravel, and then you think, oh, I can bring this back, I'll reel it up again, and then something else happens and you go, oh shit, it's getting worse, and they know that it's unraveling, and then you can just
Then
the
you just let
tension
it die and not move, and so more things happen, more things go wrong because you're avoiding the work.
Oh yes, and it's just this unraveling mess that they know that no one's saying anything, but we can feel it, and
Yeah,
that
this
tension.
tension.
Oh, it's just the worst. It's the pits. I don't want anyone to go through that. I'm sure some of you have.
I'm going to put in here. So Ursula wrote a blog a little bit about this. So in this blog, you told me a little bit about, or you tell us a little bit about a situation where everything was going wrong. So can you tell us what happened? Like, what do you think contributed to everything going wrong? How did you turn it around? Did you turn it around? Like, tell us about that story.
Yeah. So initially, what I thought I was doing right was I went in for an interview. I was confident. I, explained exactly my skills and my capabilities. The we even discussed salary point of view that day, and I was thinking, oh, this is pretty positive. I was driving home and I was offered the job. Like the mobile phone was ringing, and they were like, "You need to come in. We want you to start ASAP." And I thought, wow, I did
And
really
that
well.
feeling is so good. You're like, I nailed it. This is going to be
Yeah,
great.
nailed it. I remember thinking I've nailed this job. I said I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I love the organization and I love the culture, and I knew that I really wanted to work here. I didn't know a great deal about him, but he was high profile, so I knew
Mhm.
that I could learn a lot about him and his footprint over time. But yeah, I kind of recall the time where it was just like I was saying, there was something that I had said, but it didn't sit well. And then this unraveling kind of started. And then I started self-doubt where I thought, hold on, should have I done that or shouldn't I? And this whole thing, and what we as EAs tend to do is then start to double think things and think, well, hold on, maybe I should have done this, and then we go to do that next time because maybe that might suit them better, but that's wrong as well. And then you think, oh God, how is this happening to me? And
Were they
yeah,
very busy? Were they very,
sorry,
I imagine if they're high profile, they're very busy.
they're
There's a
very
lot going
busy.
on. You don't
They're
want to
very busy.
interrupt.
He employed me from that day, knowing that I could do this role. So he could see this confident person, in front of him. But one thing got me off kilter, and it was to do with a media thing. Actually, it was a media question that had come in, and I didn't advise the right answer. In his he didn't tell me himself. I heard it through the media people, which also gave me self-doubt because I thought, why didn't he just tell me that? But he went around, skirted around, saw them and said, no, that's not the right
And
answer.
that's the worst when you think people are talking about it. Then it feels like it's 10 times bigger, doesn't it?
oh yes, yes. And that
And you start
person,
making things up in your mind that it's probably because he didn't want that to affect you, maybe that he didn't,
well, no,
or
well, maybe, but then also I had these close relationships with my principals. So I thought, why wouldn't you just tell me? Like, so it started this unraveling. Like when I say unravel, I mean like unraveling. He was thinking, oh, maybe that's not right. And I'm thinking, well, how did this happen? Why would this happen? Like, come and see me. So it kind of was like this behind the scenes type stuff, which was growing, this festering, this, untrustworthiness, this, disrespect. Like it just grew over time to the point where I felt like everything I was doing was wrong, and I was second guessing myself with everything
and
I
then you
was
get
doing.
worse. Your brain,
Oh,
you're scatterbrained. You start forgetting things because you don't like
yeah,
where you're afraid to come into work every day. It's this knock-on effect. It has
yeah,
this avalanche effect where you're not in it. You're not in that flow.
yeah. It was really, really, totally soul destroying. I'd say soul destroying, and
So how long did that go on from like how long did you
you
start
know
working
what?
for him before the incident?
I
Were you
can't
working at
believe this, but it went on for nearly 18 months. 18 months. And I hung in there because I actually really valued the organization. But mind you, I had someone in the, recruitment sector that I kept on hot dial, and I'd say to her, you need to get me the hell out of here now. Get me out now. And she was like, well, I see, but you want a particular role, and you want to go into something that you can be,
This is what it
make a
takes.
difference and do these roles. Well, that's the role you're in. And I was like, but it's not working. Get me out of here. Anyway,
So how do you turn this around? At what point are you like, this isn't serving me? I can't continue on this way. I have nothing to
yeah,
lose.
yeah.
What happens?
Well, he had an appointment to go to, and I went and got my car. I went and got my car, and he normally drives over himself, but I quickly ran and got my car, there's a turning circle, and I sat in my car and waited for him to come out the front door, and he looked at my car and he was like, he tried to walk past, and I undid the window and I said, I'm taking you to appointment. I need 5 minutes of your time. And he was like, oh, all right then. So he jumped in the car and I literally put my foot on the pedal and I said, I've got 5 minutes to tell you. I'm going to be totally honest with you and I'm going to be absolutely transparent. I'm really hating this job. I really don't like the feeling that I've got in this role. I'm full of anxiety and dread. I've actually, in the 25 years I've been working as an EA, have never felt so much doubt in my life. I want to reset the clock with you. I think that we've got off on the wrong start, and I think there's so much that we can learn from each other if we keep an open communication channel. And I'm going to give you some time to think about this, but I want your feedback. I want your honesty that you can either reset or move on. And if the choice is to move on, I'm totally comfortable with it. I just want you to tell me that rather than me second guess whether I did the right thing, because this is a very big role and I want to succeed at it, but I've
I'm
not
like
gotten off the
anxiety
block.
as you're telling me this. I realize that I'm like tensing up because I'm like, what does he
I,
say? I know what he
yeah,
says. We've talked
you
about
know
this.
what? The
I'm like,
whole time I
what
was
does he say?
talking,
But
it
that,
was
and
dead
then be
quiet.
like, no pressure. I'll be picking you up after your appointment. I'll be waiting here after your appointment.
I waited in the car park,
Oh
and
my.
I literally, he was quiet the whole time and he nodded, and yep, okay. And then I pulled up in the car park and sat there and he left. And then I said, I'll be here waiting and it'll give you the chance to think about what you want out of this relationship and whether we can work together. And when he came back from his appointment, I was by then sweating chips, and I rang my husband and I've done it.
Like, what have I done?
I may not have a job in about 15 minutes. I'm just letting you know. And my husband's like, oh, good. Thank God you told the bastard. Like, because he's
Oh, I
heard
bet they probably like
all
hated
sorts
it.
of
They were
stuff.
like, you should
Oh,
quit. You should do. Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
The
yeah.
support you get at home is you're like, okay, I need to hear that, but reality is
Yeah,
a
I
different
know.
story, right?
Yeah. And so he jumped in the car and he had a bit of a grin on his face. I remember looking at him and I thought, oh, that seems positive. And he jumped in the car and he said, well, Ursula, I think you and I can start again. I think we've got it in us to give this a shot. And I said, well, you know what? I'm super pleased you said that because I want to show you what I'm made of. And we drove back to the office. And do you know what? From that very day, we had instant respect. I had instant respect, just like I did in my previous roles. And I thought, wow, why did it have to be that difficult? Why did it have to be that hard? And I later learned through his, well, it was actually through his wife, talking to her at one point, that he'd had a number of staff in his past that were very disloyal. You could just say disloyal. There was information and things that were passed on that he knew that only came through his office management team. And so from that point on, I think he always thought that, these people are big mouths and, these office people, like, they're there to do a job, but really they don't know what they're doing. So, that helped me understand why the loyalty wasn't there and the respect wasn't there right from the word go.
Mm-hmm.
And by being, I suppose I had to be the adult. It felt like I had to be the parent in this. It felt like I was kind of like dealing with a dysfunctional kid at times, that I needed to just pull it together and go, look, is this, I'll call it what it is, because we're both uncomfortable. So I'll call it. You're not going to call it, I'll call it. I even spoke to HR prior about whether he'd been in there to look for a replacement, and they said yes. The head of HR said yes, he has been in there and he has said that he wanted a replacement. This is before, anything kind of got really sticky, but I knew
But he
that I was.
kept you. But he kept
Yeah,
you. And it was, do you think it was because he saw that loyalty? He was like, if this, it's almost like you could see, you wouldn't have had that conversation if you didn't see the possibility of being like,
yeah,
no, I know who I met. I
yeah,
know who I am. And him saying, I know who I met. It seems
Yeah.
like there was this, I know that's in them, but we've built this wall, or
Yeah.
we're wearing these costumes, and you can't say you're wearing like, that's not really you. The way you're talking to me is not really the person I met. And it's, how do you have that extremely uncomfortable conversation? And so
Mm.
how long did it take you to come up with this plan to just literally get in the car and kidnap him for 5 minutes to
Yeah.
get him to where he needs to go? Well,
Well,
how did you build this idea up and the confidence?
see, because of the role I was in as well, I couldn't really be standing in the hallway of the, as we say, the water cooler and having, a bitch session about him either. Like
Mhm.
it would just go around really quickly. So there was no one I could
You don't
really.
really have an outlet. Yeah.
I didn't have an outlet. I couldn't confide in anyone. I had to just, really take this on myself. But I knew that the thing I kept thinking about was I didn't want to leave there. I felt like I would have failed if I didn't confront him and just say, look, I need to know, do you want an out, or do you want to keep going here? Because I'll show you what I'm made of. And this has just gotten off all on the wrong start. And given that it was 18 months, I'm telling you, a long time, that I don't even know how we coped with one
I
another.
know,
Honestly,
that sounds
I,
absolutely insane, but how brave to do
yeah,
that. And just, but the funny thing is it's, once you do it, you're like, why didn't I just do this? Like, this is just me
exactly.
being an absolute equal human,
Yeah.
just being a human being, and just and being authentic, and just
Mm,
calling something what it is, which was exactly what he wanted. And
yeah,
exactly what I
exactly.
think we all want. I see we get so many, I feel like a lot of people like Jonathan Van Ness, like we have a lot of these um, gay icons that are really coming up right now. But because people are seeing somebody really be themselves, even
Yeah.
in a time where, they've obviously are telling a story of how they knew they'd be made fun of, they knew they'd be oppressed or something. They tell these stories. Jonathan, I don't know if you've read his book, it's so good. And they
No.
just don't care anymore because it's not serving their purpose. And so when we see someone being really authentically themselves, I feel like it's like the most
Mm.
desirable thing that we want as human beings. When we see that, we were like, we want to be free like that. And that's what you were able to do. And he deeply respected you for it.
Yeah, and most of us, I think, would have just left. And if this recruiter came through and said, "Hey, I've got this role," I probably would have left. But I don't. I would have probably left with an email or something to say, "Look, I'm sorry that things," just because I just have this thing about you can't burn bridges, and I learned that a long time ago because I did burn one bridge many years ago, and I thought I'll never ever do that again.
All lessons learned,
All
right?
lessons, yeah, all lessons. I walked out on a job that I absolutely hated and never came back. But later on, that person kept popping up in my career, and I was like, oh my god, the one man that
Mm.
he'd always appear, and I'd be like, that's it. No one ever burned bridges. This place is too small. It will
Mhm.
get found out, so you can't ever burn bridges. So that was it. But where we went from there, Lauren, was just like even bigger than Ben-Hur. Like it
That's amazing.
literally, he opened up the trust arms and went, "You're in now," and literally just went, "Here, this is for you." And I was like, "Oh my god, I
That's
learned
really
so
incredible though,
much."
because not a lot of people have that experience where they've turned it around and know what's possible. So when you hear all these people talking about conflict management, I'm always
Yeah.
like, did you really do that? Did you really say that to that person? Did you really find
Mm,
someone that was understanding? And here's a case where someone's actually done this. And so
mm.
from this, I know that you have, so Ursula's written a course for us over in the officials, of course, because as soon as I met her, I'm like, please, this is like, I was like, people, I want to introduce you to I want to, because of your experience and who you've worked with, and um and where your heart sits. I just, I knew, but she did a podcast episode with Hen Barker in the assistant story. If you've not heard it, I've put it in the course, but it's also worth going and finding. And she says something in there that I don't hear a lot of people say. And it's about not just going in and waiting for someone to tell you what to do, but to go find out what needs to be done and being proactive in that way. So I know from this experience and from many of the experiences you've had, you have some tips for people today on, well, how do you build that mutual respect? What are like 3 things that you can tell us about being able to build that relationship from the ground up, from day one.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I pulled on the core thing that we have as EAs, and that is our IP. We can never ever forget our intellectual property that we bring to every role. And that was probably the biggest thing that I pulled on. I was like, hold on a minute. I've had a career that spans over 25 years. I've worked for very senior professionals and executive all around Australia. I have done, I've won awards. I've literally bent over backwards. I've missed out on half my child's life for, really delivering to this profession. And all of that combined, and even the burnt bridges and every lesson I've learned, that is all part of my intellectual property. What the hell is this person thinking that I am when I haven't even shown him 1/4 of my IP? Because at this stage, that the rest of it looks like a bunch of poo. Like I want to show him what he's bought for his money.
And you
And
start to doubt that IP. You start to forget you have it.
well,
When
because that,
it's amazing how
yeah,
that knock, you said it made you off kilter. But I've talked to so many assistants right now who, because of the pandemic, because they're remote. I talked to one at a university. I was doing training there, and she said, when should I send a Teams message? Should I email? Like, I'm not sure how to communicate with my executive. We had a great relationship for 10 years, and now he's got kids at home, and it's really hard to get a hold of him. And I'm like, she'd been knocked. She suddenly totally questioned their entire relationship. I said, well, have you picked up the phone and just said, hey, I need 5 minutes of your time, and just have a normal conversation like, but she was so afraid to bother him, even though for 10 years she built that respect and never felt that in the office. She felt
mm,
that here. And I'm like, don't use Teams, don't use an email. If you don't, you wouldn't pick up the
yeah,
phone, you pick up the phone.
yeah,
But it's hard because she had that little knock of
yeah,
going remote and not
mm,
having that physical space to walk into. And I know
yeah,
so many assistants are feeling this. They're not getting the message, like messages are being sent to their boss and they're missing out on because they would see their emails, but they're getting a Slack or a
yeah.
Teams message or something. And it's this kind of stuff is happening to everyone. You just get that little knock and you
Mm.
forget to
You
rely
forget.
on the abilities you already have, this personal IP, as you call it.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I call it that because it's the thing that I drew on that. I pulled on it, and that's what made me courageous. At the end of the day, I thought, well, this is what I'm made of, and I didn't do that job for blood, sweat, and tears for no reason. I've been doing this work forever, and there's no way someone is going to knock me off my seat here. I need to
Mm-hmm.
prove that I can actually do it. So that was the first thing, was think about what I actually brought to the role and what he bought from me that day we met. And
Mm-hmm.
that was my IP, and that was my ability to tell him about how I could help him with his vision and goals and get on with what he wanted, because he was going to make some really big changes. And he wanted to really engrave his name in the place. Like, he wanted to make his mark, and he had
Mm-hmm.
a whole of Australia looking at him for that reason. So, I got that. But equally, I knew that it definitely involved. Later on, I recognized that we don't always consider that. We don't trust ourselves. Fulfill. What's the word I'm trying to say? It's like we can doubt ourselves really quickly, and even coming out and owning my own business and meeting hundreds of EAs through coaching and through training, and everyone here tonight would recognize this, that we, for some reason, do, if something gets knocked our way, we do blame ourselves. It's like is that must be me, that must be me, I've
Even
done
just
something
quitting a job that we loved and we're moving on to a new job that we're really excited about, we feel,
wrong.
I know so many people that resonate with this, that you feel like that's a failure. Just
Yeah.
quitting your job, just saying this is not,
I
I'm
felt
moving
that was
on
a
with my
failure.
life.
Yeah,
it
yeah.
it feels like it's this. I just talked to someone who had gotten a great job offer, was quitting their job. They ended up staying because the person loved them so much they countered offered, but the person was crying, talking to them, and I've been there, because you feel like you're letting them down when really it's like they look at you like it's okay, it's okay. And
Mhm.
then in this case, this assistant was kept, and made an offer, and they didn't know their worth, and they didn't understand their worth until this person said, listen, we can get you more money, we can do this, you can go. It was an amazing story, but we get so emotional because it feels like it feels like a failure, just because we should be able to figure everything out. We should be, we have this pressure that no one puts more pressure on us than ourselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
So just
And
relying on your own skills again was just,
yeah,
yeah.
and knowing that you're going to put 150, but you're not going to make someone, miss their meeting or fail in their job on purpose. That's not what we're about. We're the backbone. I like to say the backbone of the organization and your executive. And if that backbone doesn't feel confident in what they're doing, the executive is going to look like a puppet. So
Yeah.
it's just so important to recognize that in ourselves and understand that that's what we bring to the role. That's what we bring to the organization. And if we start to double think it and start to doubt ourselves, that's where things start to play up. And we have to look at ourselves sometimes. I know obviously he was painful, but how quickly was I shedding this whole doubt to him as well? I mean, it's not hard. The human condition is so intelligent today that people can sniff this shit out really quickly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can look super confident and sit in front of your boss and say, I've got this, but he's like, no, you don't. Or
Yeah. And
I
it,
can
and
tell
it, and it
that.
festers and it gets worse. And then that's all they see. They just assume you're going to
Yeah,
fail.
yeah,
And you can't, but then you fail because you're not concentrating, because you're not doing the thing. And
yeah,
it's all
yeah.
lessons. And I've been there myself. I totally understand. And to have the courage to turn that around is, I mean,
Mm,
it is so powerful to hear this story and hear that it is possible, and it gives
it
power to
is.
other people to do this. Okay, so then you've
Mm,
talked about your side of it, but as we talked about in this first story where everything went really well,
mm,
um, there's another side of it. There's two sides of this formula that make this powerful mutual respect relationship. And what would you say, like, you've brought to the table your abilities and your IP?
mm.
What
Well,
about
from
your principal?
from their perspective, what I worked out working with them is that they they expect that you can do this. They have the trust in you that you can do it. And I found that we as EAs tend to
Give
sometimes
it
on those
away.
lines give it away. So,
Yeah.
and that has come more in time of owning my own business and fronting up like a consultant, working with clients and saying, okay, you've
Just
asked
slap
for
them
an
like,
EA.
wait, you have this in you. What are you doing?
Yeah, so this is, and they've gone, great. This is what I need, X, Y, and Z. Thanks very much. I was saying, could you look after this? And this is what, and yep, you've got it. Thanks very much. We'll pay you X amount every hour, and yep, send us a bill every month. Thanks very much. Okay. And then I've walked away going, oh my God, like they've just trusted me with their bank account and their kids, school details,
And
and
at this level, you instantly get everything on the first day. Like I
first
had
day.
bank account details to squillions on my first day,
Yeah,
my first private
yeah,
PA role. And I was like, because that's how they roll. That's what
yeah,
it's high stakes. And that's why they want loyal people. And that's why they stay so long. And I've seen this as well, is because the trust level that has to happen, and
yeah,
they have to say, I have to trust this person. They have to get these details over because they know they got better things to do. And it's intimidating. It can be overwhelming to suddenly be like, oh my God, I can really mess stuff up.
well, the first thing I did was invest in like a really expensive IT system because I thought if anything leaks from my computer in a little office in Canberra, everyone's going to go, oh my God, that's that little VA business and all your stuff's being leaked out of there. So yeah, I was
Yeah.
really conscious of security but it was that client onboarding process and then having conversations with clients continuously where we then moved into recruitment and they were saying to me, look, I just need an EA that is going to be my wing woman, someone that I can just trust from day one, someone that's just going to know that they've got their shit together and that they're going to push my shit together and make it roses. And I
Well,
was
I
like,
find
yes,
that they sometimes are thinking you're going to be a miracle worker from the moment you
yeah,
walk in. And we kind
yeah,
of tell them we're going to be that in the interview.
yeah,
And
yeah, of
so when
course.
we get in there and they're very busy and we don't know anything about the business,
Mm,
we can have all the IP that we want or that we need. But if we can't get that information, or
yeah,
if they expect you should know this stuff, we're not mind readers. There is
yeah.
this level of investment that has to happen, right? on
yeah.
their
And
side.
they do think we're mind readers. I mean, how many times has your executive come out and said, so and so, and that person over there, and yeah, if you could sort that out, and you'd know what was happening there, wouldn't you? You sort of
Yeah,
think,
I literally wrote this down as a post to put up later. Hey, just get me, could you, or I was thinking about doing a reel about it. Hey, you know that guy I spoke to at that thing last week? Can you get him on the phone and have him talk to that other lady? And we're just like, okay, but you don't know that from day one, do you?
no, no,
No. And
definitely
so how do
not.
you get that information? What is your advice on that?
Yeah, it's a bit actually. I love the point, the comment that Ebony says in her things about going on safari, because that is a lot about what I went and did, and I call it, you know, discovering their footprint and researching their footprint, because which, you know, could be a bit of a safari hunt along the
Yeah.
way. The people they've met, the people that are the projects that they worked on, and what kind of success they've had over their time, and where they've worked. Has it always been in one country or broader? And what does that mean? Perhaps if they travel today, is that going to mean that you can connect with some people that they were once connected with? And you know, I went on this big research thing, and I started to actually made a PowerPoint slide of the footprint originally, just listing various companies, and you know, along with who's who in the zoo, you know, as I say,
Mm-hmm.
with contact details, but also with organisations and projects and jobs that they had in the past,
Do
and
you,
that helped
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
immensely.
I was going to
So
say, do you prep your clients to be prepared to download, do this data dump, and prepare your EAs to say, you have to ask this? Because what you said in that whole podcast with Hen was you sat down with someone you were filling in and just said, okay, what are your goals? And they said, no assistant has ever asked me that. And I
yeah,
was like, yes, I was listening to that. And I was like, yes, yes, yes. I was like,
yeah,
this is the thing. This is the thing. Nobody asks in an interview. Very rarely they say, what are the goals of the company? What's the mission of the company? How does this role affect that? Get them to answer it ahead of time so you don't have to figure it out later. So all this stuff happening from the interview process is so important.
Oh, absolutely. And look, I just spoke to an EA today that I put forward for a role, for a CEO, executive assistant CEO role. And I said exactly that. I said, I want to know, I want you to push this and do this. And she was like, oh my God, oh my God. Like, what else? What else? And I was like, make sure you do this. And like, they want to know that you're interested. So talk about the communities they connect with, and whether they do any
And it seems like a
non-for-profit work.
no-brainer. They're like, oh, of course. Don't they always are like, oh, of course I should do that. But
They do, they go,
we're
that's
not
such a good
trained to
point.
think that way.
Yeah, or I like to think that maybe we've got blinkers on while we're in the roles that we're in, you know, because we're so busy. It's head down, bum up, and we're just da, 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 da.
Well,
And then
people I
it
think
comes
think an
to
interview is I have to make them like I have to say the right thing that they want to hear. I just need this money. I need this role. And I think hopefully people are starting to change their minds about that, which is you bring value to the role and it's a two-way street, this interview. You need to
that's
contribute
right.
and they need to
Yeah,
contribute. And there's more things you could be asking. And in fact, when you see somebody actually do that, you get so much more respect. You get the job over anybody else. It's this,
yeah,
but people are like, oh, I can't, I have my own husband. He's very British. You know, it took him years to feel comfortable to be like, oh, I should be asking these questions. And then he gets the job. You know, you get the job when you do that because
yeah.
they go, oh, this person, they know what they're doing. They're asking the right questions. This is not that none of the other candidates are doing this. And it's funny
Yeah,
because it feels like common sense. But if no one's told you to
exactly.
do that,
Mm.
you're
I
like,
know, and that's exactly right. She knew. She knew. She was like, "Actually, I know this. I know this. I should be doing this. I just thank you. I just needed a refresher. I need a reminder of the sort of things I need to be checking on. Of course, I want to know that. And yeah, I don't want to work there if it's not going to be a good fit for me either. You know." And I'm like, "You need to find that. Like, I wouldn't put you forward. I know you put 150% into your job. Like, I want to make sure you're happy. Don't worry about them. Like, make sure you're going to find what you want out of this role." And it's just so crucial to the future, you know, and that way you can then sit down your job and go, right, now I know this much, let's get further and let's delve into what we need to do our jobs really well.
that's brilliant. This has been absolutely amazing. So, what I heard from that is if you're trying to build a great relationship with your executive from day one, is have that confidence. I'm going to say three C's. So, have that confidence in your IP,
Mm,
in the abilities that you have. Don't give it away. You've earned it in the, you're not even, you've earned it over your career, but they hired you. This is what they want you to do.
mm,
So keep that confidence in your IP. have the courage to say something or to challenge when there's another C, when something's going wrong, and just being honest. And then make sure you get that counsel from them. You cannot know this stuff. The less time they give you in the beginning, the longer it's going to take to make that connection. As Ursula, 18 months where they probably avoiding each other and trying not to, be in each other's space, just doing what needed to be done. And probably that opened up this, you go through the shared awkward experience, and all of a sudden it does break down these barriers. So you've got your confidence, your courage, and the counsel from the executive. You cannot do this all. You can't. You have to get that information from them.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And that counsel's
okay.
important for that reason, because I think that if we leave jobs that we're not 100% sure we've, not been the best fit, I think a little bit of our confidence leaves with that job as well. And that's why
Yeah.
it's so important not to leave that piece there, to push it back in with you and walk away going, okay, settled. We're on the same page. It didn't work out for X reasons, but they gave you that feedback.
You're so right. Cause I literally see like an image of like a cut taken away, or it's like a
Oh,
chunk taken away, and you're
yes.
hobbling to the next job,
Oh,
when really
so
you had all that all the time. So my question, so does anyone have any questions? There's been great feedback in the chat. Really lovely. People are saying this has been powerful, a powerful story to share. See, it's these stories that may bring us closer together. And when you hear somebody else, like you mentioned Ebony, she's one of our other instructors. She's at the assistance list. She's absolutely fabulous. She calls something going on Safari when her executive comes out of a meeting, and then she goes and tries to find all the information before her one-to-one, so she's as prepared as possible. And so we were
wonderful.
talking about her. So she's also one of our instructors. But if you guys have any questions, please let us know. But I'll quickly, because everyone's going to be going into their next meetings, tell you that Ursula has written this beautiful course. It comes with a workbook filled with questions that you need to be asking your executive from day one. As you've heard from her, you can turn this around. So if you're in the middle of a role right now, there's still time to say, hey, you know what? I don't know what your goals are or your targets are. Or having that you mentioned the relationship with the spouse. This is something you learn in high net worth and high profile relationships, is that the spouse is really important. They have home things that they don't tell you about that you need to know. They should be off because little Timmy has a birthday party or whatever. And so I think that was really interesting that you said this, but she's packed it full of these questions. It's a certificate course. And if you want to join, our doors are closed right now, but we've left it open just right now for you guys. If you do join theofficials.com/capital EA, it will take you to the course, which I'm going to show you really quickly what it looks like inside. You get a certificate. This course is for you. A little trailer about the course. You learn all about her. And then these are the different topics inside about upfront conversations, your personal intellectual property, active listening, and how to communicate. So it's really, I mean, you really packed this full of your experiences. And so I hope you guys check it out. There's no joining fee if you sign up in the next 48 hours. That link is only good for 48 hours because our doors are actually shut. We're giving you a little evergreen backdoor access just because she's amazing. And if you are here and you want to learn more about that course, these resources for you. And
Did you tell
also
them
with that, you join, I'm sorry, go ahead.
sorry, you guys, I was going to say, did you tell them I went and did the course after I wrote it, and I just loved it. I love the way that Lauren put this together. I'm such a dag, but I went in and I was like, right, I'm going to pretend like I'm doing this. And, and then I got my own certificate at the end, and I think it's just beautiful. It's so professional. I absolutely love how it's aesthetically pleasing. I did the content.
I love that. I love that part of it because I was a journalism
Oh,
major. So I love putting
beautiful.
the workbooks together and pulling, and
It's
you
just
create all this
gorgeous.
amazing content. I want to make it shine. I want it
Oh,
to be digestible and
oh,
something
it's
fun
such
and
a
interesting.
lovely process to step through and fill in. It's such a great course. I love
Which is
doing it.
Thank you so much. And you also become a part of our community where we
Mm,
have these types of conversations. Just had a power hour last night where we talked like this in a safe space and told stories about what was going on. It's a live kind of coaching call that I have. We do it every month as members. Plus you get access to all of the courses that we have, not just Ursula's course. You get all of them all the time. We release a new one every month. And then there's also obviously mentorship opportunities. this is Ursula's information. Can you guys see that? I'm going to make it full screen really quickly, and I'm going to make myself hide. Oh, I love this app called
Ah,
I love it.
mhm.
And so please reach out to her. Please follow Capital EA on Instagram and on LinkedIn, and say hi to her and let her know what you thought about this, about her story. Go give her some love. So thank you so much for joining us today. You know I love you. If anyone has any questions, let us know. You can email us. But we'll let you guys go on with your day. But thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Ursula. I love you so much.
My
Thank you so much for
pleasure.
telling that story.
Everyone
That
go
was
well.
amazing.
My pleasure. To everyone go well, and just know that you guys are doing a brilliant job. I just wish you all the very, very best. You're doing a great job.
Fantastic. Bye, everybody. Mwah.